Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Season 1, Episode 15 to 17. I know this is a little bit of a shorter review of episodes just because reasonably, when looking at it, I would love to do like 10 episodes in one shot. But then when also looking at it, it's like after a while, it's just like, I want to also try to like get more done in one day, or I want to try to like attempt to do more things and more reviews and stuff like that. And ultimately, like a show would normally bog down that kind of thing. And so recently, it's just like, how about just kind of just go into like a show every X amount of time or something like that. Anyways, mood point. So going into these episodes, really we have it to where it's fully fledgedly just basically episodes that mostly involve Oliver and Ryan. Marissa is there because she has to be, but when looking at it, it's basically just Oliver and Ryan. How could Oliver really just get under Ryan's skin? And if we thought Luke was bad, oh man, Oliver though. And that's the problem with all of these stories where it gets way too Ryan heavy. Where it's just like, man, like, if anything, there's so many people in this story. That's why they call it the OC. But instead, it feels like too much of Ryan is not a good thing. But, anyways, so I think my favorite characters in these three episodes probably have to be Sandy and Jimmy. I'm loving uh, this dynamic duo of Sandy and Jimmy, where Sandy's just like, I need to help Jimmy out. I really need to help Jimmy out. And eventually we'll get it to where Sandy is ultimately going, like, I like it to where ultimately Sandy just seems to consistently just keep trying to find people that ultimately he can be a dynamic duo with and just kind of help out. And I really like that about Sandy, where eventually it just seems like he is connecting with people and trying to like really help them. He did that to Ryan. Now it's Jimmy. Who is next? We'll find out. So going on into here, we ultimately have the aftermath of really just having Haley in here and how they're just kind of dealing with Haley being home. And so reasonably we have it to where they're dealing with Haley being there. They're they're dealing with ultimately Oliver being way too clingy to Marissa, and we're ultimately dealing with the escalation of the Ryan Oliver journey, but also the kind of extremely annoying story between Seth, Anna, and Summer. Kelly, bam, wham, wham kind of thing. Whatever that means. I don't know what I said there, but it Kelly Pam, bam, bam. That's the movie Phone Booth. That's what I was trying to say. Anyways, so we have to have Seth ultimately pick one of these gals, and ultimately after he picks, now we have to have the other three episodes of it being like, oh my god, he made this choice. He's going to regret this forever, kind of thing. He's going to regret this forever. So let's go into, so we have ultimately, I would say, the only two people that just seem to just be just standing around having nothing to do, because ultimately we have it to where Luke is just kind of like, I don't know what to do now that I don't really have a story with Marissa. So he's just kind of floating around, and ultimately at first he's kind of being cringe, but then eventually Luke is kind of tying himself to Ryan, and I'm liking this journey of where kind of Luke is like, yeah, we get to the cringe Luke, but then eventually we get back into the Luke that we really do enjoy at some points or most of the time. So we have it where ultimately Summer is also without Marissa, and so basically without Marissa, being tied to Summer. It just feels like she's just kind of like, yeah, I have nothing to do. Oh, woe is me now that I don't have my Marissa to ultimately be tied to. Because, man, it's kind of funny when you have it to a relationship kind of like separates and you have to have, like, oh, okay, well, Marissa is tied too much into this story. So that bogs down like stories for like 2 to 3 other people. And we have it to where ultimately Ryan is ultimately tied to uh, a story with Marissa, and so like now like that makes it to where ultimately Seth has nothing to do, or anybody that's tied to Seth doesn't have anything to do, and ultimately we have it to where like uh, Sandy and Kirsten have stuff to do, but it's just slivers of stuff. They're just like, here's your consolation prize for being a part of the show. So let's ultimately go into talking about these spoilers. Let's crack them out because, without a doubt, reasonably, there are some things going on into here. But at the end of the day, it's the Ryan Oliver story within these 3 episodes. So let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to spoil these episodes. So, reasonably within these episodes, we have it to where Oliver. This is Oliver era now. I didn't even realize who Oliver was last time that I talked about this, but now we have Oliver era. Reasonably, this guy is so unbelievably clingy to Marissa, and when looking at it, like this guy is basically like tying into Marissa's life like it's nobody's business. I mean, like, this guy is really just guerrilla styling it. He's just like, how could I be a part of Marissa's every single second? And if there is any time where Marissa is not in my sight, I have to figure out a masterfully craftable plan to get her back into my good graces within, like, this is the most neediest guy I've ever seen in my life. So going into this, so we have it to her ultimately. We have Sandy that is in the Sandy and Kirsten that are desperately wanting their alone time, which basically means their wham bam, thank you ma'am, but I'm gonna come back again time. And so ultimately we have it to where in this first episode we have it to where the kiddies are all going into a Ronnie's concert, I believe. More than likely, these episodes might be out of sync or whatever. I might be tangenting in all kinds of things that happen within these 3 episodes. So if any of these things are out of order, I do apologize, but justifiably. Watch all 3 of these episodes and come back and then just hear what all I have to say about spoilers about them and how I felt about everything. So we ultimately have it to where, again, we have it to where Oliver is mentioning that, hey guys, how about you go to this Ronnie concert? And basically everybody's like, well, like, I think that all the tickets are sold out. And Oliver's like, well, hey, I know a guy because I know everybody. So let's go to this Oliver concert. So we have it uh, to a reasonably Kirsten and Sandy are getting their alone time, and ultimately we have Haley, who is kind of being the bogger of bad etiquette because reasonably she's eating them out of house and home, and so ultimately we've had Haley come in here and kind of establish that she owns the pool house. And so now we have it to where Haley is now like living at this home and she has nowhere to go because recently her party was taken down, and now like she's just kind of left with like all of her friends wanting her dead. So recently we have it to where Haley is just kind of like, well, I have nothing to do, I have nowhere to go. And so we have to where eventually Jimmy ends up just kind of swooping in and ultimately giving Haley some direction of where to go. Because we ultimately have to where Jimmy is speaking to Sandy about putting together this or keeping this restaurant called the Lighthouse, and this is the funnest story in these episodes. So we have it to ultimately Jimmy mentions how he used to manage that place, and Sandy is like, you know what, like how about we just run this business? Like when looking at it, he thinks that it's much better doing that than kind of being a lawyer, and so reasonably like Jimmy kind of just wants to go. Jimmy or Sandy wants to go into business with Jimmy, but Jimmy's like, "Are you sure? Like, I could mess things up." And Sandy's like, "Dude, like, let's do this. Like, I don't care. Like, just if you mess things up, then oh well. But ultimately, I just want to keep you here because Jimmy is consistently like mentioning that he's like, dude, I gotta find something out of state. Like, I gotta leave." And so Sandy's like, "No, like, you're my best friend, and I can't have you leave." So we have it to ultimately Sandy and Jimmy are signing these contracts, and we ultimately have it to where Haley is eventually meeting Jimmy, and so ultimately we have it to where Jimmy and Haley are reminiscing about old days on how like basically how young Haley was and this and that, and so we ultimately have it to where Haley mentions that her and Jimmy are gonna go out to just kind of go on a get together, a date, and whatever, what have you. And so reasonably, Kirsten and Kirsten and Sandy are like, "Oh my God, we can have alone time if the kids go to this Ronnie concert." Because ultimately Oliver said, "Yeah, I can get you in." So we ultimately have it to where Luke is this awkward mess that ultimately is to be presented with us, where he's like this goofy character that is like playing games with Seth, and like he's saying all this stuff. It's like, "Oh, I think I really killed him," and Seth is just like, "Oh my God, Luke! Now that we're all friends, you're weird, Luke. You're so weird." Um, but anyways, so we go into here and we have Luke who is now like tying himself onto everything that everyone is doing, and we ultimately have Ryan who is having his kissing and cuddling time with Marissa, and I'm like, this is what's gonna drive Ryan crazy. Like, dude, you're hugging and smooching onto Marissa, and like you should not be going cray cray during this time when ultimately you are locking lips with the Marissa and cuddling. You should not be this person that ultimately goes bananas, but he does. So we have it ultimately where Oliver is telling them about this concert, and ultimately he is like mentioning that everything is going to go great, and like wouldn't it be just great if we all just got together, and that it'll make me forget about my girlfriend, that ultimately it didn't go well with my girlfriend, and ba 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 ba. So we have it to where ultimately everybody's like, "Okay, Ronnie, whoever this band is, great, let's go." So ultimately they head to this concert, and while that is going on, we ultimately have it where Sandy and Kirsten think they're gonna have time alone, but instead we have it to where Haley and Jimmy are also at the house playing board games bizarrely, and to where ultimately they end up having to like play Connect Four, and so we have it to where eventually it seems like Haley is kind of giving Kirsten crap, and ultimately like it's kind of they're kind of all reflecting on the old days, but again like Haley is kind of giving Kirsten crap, and ultimately just kind of like she's kind of giving crap to everybody to where Sandy just can't take it anymore, and he puts his foot down to ultimately like, dude, like we're like you're eating us out of house and home, and we're like having you here, and this and that, and you're just like treating us like garbage. Like, you know what? Like, I can't wait for you to go back to Daddy Warbucks and for him to give you money so you can get the F out of here. Like, good God, woman. Like, if anything, just get out of our house. So we have it to where Sandy and Haley have a blow up, and then eventually we have it to where Sandy comes back to Haley and apologizes. He's like, you know what? Like, I was too much in the connect to the forest zone, and reasonably, like, I'm sorry about all what I said. It was like I went too far. And Haley was like, well, you know what? Like, yeah, like I know, like I can be like a bear and whatever. So they kind of make amends, but when looking at it, like, yeah, we eventually are seeing that Haley is going to wind up with Jimmy, and eventually just kind of that's how they kind of carve their path to eventually just having Jimmy still realizing that, yeah, he can probably get into this whole restaurante biz, but it may or may not work out. So we have a tour ultimately pushing on. So we have to where we are at this Ronnie concert, and it seems that everybody is having a questionable good time, even though Summer is kind of the third wheel of what is now Anna and Seth's relationship, because ultimately they ultimately have, like, Seth is kind of trying to avoid telling Summer about their relationship, but eventually Seth and Anna have to tell Summer because reasonably Anna is telling Summer that they ended up kissing kissing on New Year's Eve, to where ultimately Summer is kind of talking to Anna as if she is a little bit of a hoe. Like, come on, like, man, you're a little bit of a, like, how could you do that kind of thing? It's like how could you have just snuck into just like, isn't that a little underhanded kind of thing? It's like, dude, like, you know what? Summer was thinking like, man, like, why couldn't I be with Seth? And so like everything has to work out for Summer, I guess. But anyways, so we ultimately have it to where Seth doesn't want to tell Summer about Anna's relationship, and that is almost causing a rift with Anna and Seth. But we have it to where Anna and Seth are wearing like the same clothes all the time, which I thought was hilarious. But ultimately, it's kind of nice to see like couples both wearing the same thing, even though that's really weird and just kind of like, okay, I could see how you're a couple, but like that's kind of weird to wear almost the identical same stuff all the time. But anyways, so we have a tour ultimately. Anna and Seth ultimately break into Summer during this concert. That ultimately they are a couple. So, because Anna is really saying like, you know what? If we tell Summer that ultimately we're a couple, she can be able to easily find any number of guys. And it's also to the fact where eventually after this concert is over, we have it to where Luke is hitting on Summer, and ultimately he's like, Summer, you're looking really, really good right now. And Summer's like, I'm sorry, Luke, but no. Luke is just like, Summer. You know what, Summer? Summer's like, no. So I just thought that whole car scene was hilarious, where Luke was just trying to lay it on thick with Summer and just like, you know what, Summer, we're the only people that don't have a story in the show. How about you and me, you know? And Summer's like, no. So we have it to where Anna and Seth are ultimately consistently berated by the third wheel, which is Summer, to where ultimately Summer is ultimately trying to pull Anna and Seth's relationship apart by just ultimately being this like overly annoying character. If she was annoying before, oh good lord. Nothing wrong with the person that plays Summer. It's not her fault. It's just her dialogue that she has to be given, that ultimately is this swerving like thing. where ultimately we have it to where reasonably Anna and Seth are like, hey, do you want to go with us? And she's like, no, you're not going to go with me. I'm going with you, kind of thing. To ultimately, everything has to be like a swerve kind of thing of just like, we have it to where Anna and Seth are asking her, it's like, well, hey, maybe all three of us can do something together at some time, at some time, and Summer's like, well, what are you guys doing right now? Like, come on. Like, come on, guys. As I almost poke myself in the eye. Come on. We need to be together. So ultimately, I can just tear you apart like a bear. I'm going to tear you apart like a bear. So ultimately, we have this Ronnie concert, and it seems that everything is going well for Ryan and Marissa. So we have the lurking of the shadows of Oliver. Because reasonably, we have it to where Marissa and Ryan are ultimately listening to Ronnie, and ultimately Ryan is like, "You're not gonna have me dance, are you?" And she's like, well, "I don't know." So we ultimately have it to where when they get to this concert, we have Ryan and Marissa ultimately doing their couple thing, and so Oliver is ultimately just going, "Man, I want the Marissa." Because it seems like Oliver is hoping that Ryan wouldn't go to everything or would have some excuse for not going to something. And so that way, reasonably, like the New Year's thing, that Oliver can just kind of keep like trying to swoop in. And, but Ryan is just like, nope. So we have to ultimately, because Ryan and Marissa are together, Oliver ends up going into explosive mode to where he is ultimately he is going and calling his dealer so that way he can get some sweet, delicious drugs. They're not delicious, they're not sweet, but if anything, they're just what he needs. So we have it to where Oliver is just so upset that he can't win over Marissa, so he has to go and win over a drug dealer to get him some drugs. So we have it to where within here that to where Luke is at this concert just a blithering idiot, but God bless him. He's like shaking, she's shaking, and like we ultimately have it to where Seth is just like, who sings this song? And Luke's like, Ronnie, and he's like, how about we keep it that way? How about we keep it that way, Luke? You can keep doing this as much as you want, but like, come on. So we ultimately have it to where Luke is getting his drugs, and we find out that Ryan is going out to kind of just either talk to Oliver or something. And we find out that ultimately Oliver, his drug dealer, was actually a police officer. And we have it to Ryan is trying to protect Oliver from getting attacked by this drug dealer. And ultimately, the drug dealer is ultimately a police officer. Like, hey, I'm a police officer, letting you know. And so Ryan is like, oh, okay, well, go ahead and arrest him then. We ultimately have it to where Ryan has to leave the concert, to where ultimately Luke, in reply, has said, shake. That's his reply. He's enjoying the concert. Let him enjoy his time. So we move on to Ryan leaving. Ultimately, he had to, I think, borrow some keys from Seth, and so, so while Luke is shaking, Ryan is going off to save Oliver by calling up Sandy, who ultimately was at home, not giving it to Kirsten because he just really, man, they need to just rent a hotel room, him and Kirsten for like a week or something, just be like, dude, I'm gonna be on vacation for a week, just like renting a hotel room so we could just like all night long. So they like Kirsten and Sandy just really need that alone time. It's just like it's undeniable at this point. So we have it to where Ryan is ultimately at the prison and trying to have Sandy get Oliver off whatever this thing was, and we have it to where Sandy is ultimately just going like, yeah, I think I got him off. If anything, like, yeah, I think it was just like there were some mistakes made and this and that, and we ultimately have it to where Oliver ends up getting released, and ultimately we have it to where uh, Oliver is ultimately begging for Ryan not to tell Marissa what had happened. And Ryan is like, no, like, I'm not going to tell her what happened. You are. Like, if anything, no. So we have it to ultimately Ryan is calling Marissa and handing the phone to Oliver, and Oliver is telling Marissa what had happened. So we ultimately have it to where the next day we have it to where, you know what, Oliver is just feeling good about his time, and so we have it to where Oliver is one trying to get into the same school that Marissa is in. He is ultimately uh trying to he's trying to get into her school, ultimately also trying to get everybody to play golf. And we have within here that there is some bizarrish ulterior motive within Oliver, and that is ultimately to really try to take Ryan off. So we have it to where Ryan is kind of pulling the strings of Oliver, really just trying to decipher, okay, why is it that you wanted to go to the same school as us? Like, it seems like, if anything, you are close to graduating in your school, so what is the point of you coming here? And, like, if anything, you're just a few credits short. And, like, Oliver keeps shifting his story to where it just seems like, oh no, like, if anything, all the credits didn't transfer from here to over there, so now I have to start at the exact same level as you guys. Oh, what a coincidence. And so we have it where Oliver is so shifty and so crafty with every little thing that he's talking about. And so ultimately we have Oliver who is mentioning, hey, how about we all go how about we all go to golf? Like, if anything, like, after the whole Ronnie concert situation, I ended up calling my folks about all what happened, and I ended up calling I think Oliver's girlfriend's name is like Natalie or something. I ended up calling Natalie, and we ultimately are going to give it another shot, another chance. Things are working out. Things are going to work out with me and Natalie, the invisible woman that ultimately he doesn't have. So we ultimately have it to where reasonably that Oliver's saying, yeah, let's go to golf. Let's everybody go golfing. And so reasonably we have it to where everybody, like, the Ryan and Luke thing together within this whole golf thing is getting really strong. The whole relationship between them is getting real strong. So we have it to where Marissa and Oliver end up going in one car, and Luke takes Ryan to go into his. And so we have where within these golf moments that reasonably Oliver is telling Ryan that every time Ryan is like hitting a golf club, we have Oliver who's like right next to him whispering sweet nothings, like basically saying, "Oh yeah, like really good hit there. Were you like metaphorically like, or were you picturing my head on the golf ball and this and that? Like, were you imagining that you could hit me. And so we have within here that ultimately everybody is just trying to like get their swing on. We ultimately have to Ryan. I don't think even wanted to golf because reasonably, like he thought he was going to be awful at it. Because ultimately we have it to where Sandy is trying to teach him how to putt, and Ryan ends up smacking the ball into the pool, and Seth gets it for him. So they go golfing, and so reasonably we have it to where they eventually are getting like pretty much done with golfing, and so we have it to where every little situation where Ryan is trying to like get a little ball into a hole. We have it to where Oliver's like, oh, so close. Like you could imagine if they did the entire day of them on this golf course, where ultimately you just have Oliver that's like, oh, every little thing that you do, Ryan, I'm just gonna just whisper sweet nothings into your ear. To where you just have it to where like Ryan is having issues with putting, and we have it to where reasonably uh, Oliver is just like, oh, so close, Ryan. If only you could have gotten more in. To where, like, even Luke is like looking at that guy and he's like, God, if you don't, like, I want to punch him now. Like, I want to, like, my fist needs to go in his face. I'd really appreciate if that could just happen right now. And so we have it to where ultimately just Ryan is just having problems putting, and to where eventually Luke is helping him out by saying, "Hey, they're not looking." So we have it to where Ryan is just kind of smacking the ball in so that way they can be done, and we have it to where Oliver is saying, "It's like, well, hey guys, how about we race to get back to ultimately." Like get drinks. It's like the first one that gets back ultimately pays for drinks. And so we have it to where they are golf carting their way uh, to get to drinks, and it seems that Oliver and Marissa are way ahead. But then eventually we get it to where it seems that Ryan and Luke are catching up. But then we have it to where Marissa and Oliver is of course behind the wheel. He is turning around to almost crash into Chicken Wise, Luke and Ryan, but we have it to where Oliver swerves at the last second, or really Ryan has to swerve to ultimately go into some ditch somewhere, and we have it to where Marissa is going, "Oh my God, are you guys okay?" And Marissa's trying to convince them that he didn't almost hit them on purpose. And Luke is ultimately telling Ryan, it's like, dude, he did that on purpose. Like he was trying, like that guy is crazy. So we ultimately go on, and so reasonably we have it to where Ryan is just like, God, I need to know more about this Oliver guy, to the point where we have it to where when Ryan is kind of getting little kernels of knowledge from Oliver, the more he is trying to just get a little bit of piece of that Oliver by talking to him. Like we eventually have it at one point where Oliver mentions to Ryan that there was a little incident that had him want to move to a different school. So we have it to where Ryan has to sneak into school to find Oliver's files, because we have it to where Ryan is like, God, I need to know more about this kid, and Seth is like, well, you can find out more things by getting into his file, and Ryan's like, dude, no one's just gonna hand me that. It's like, well, if you sneak into this school, and Ryan's like, good God, like, man, like I'm trying as much as humanly possible to just stay on the right rings of things, because we have it to where we had Ryan, who ultimately got like suspended from 2 soccer games, and now we have it to where Ryan is even going further into effing things up. So we ultimately have it to where Ryan is going and trying to find this file on Oliver, which is giving him way much more of an eye opening experience of who Oliver really is. But ultimately, Ryan gets caught. So he ends up getting caught, and we have it to where Ryan, Sandy, and Kirsten, and I think the dean or the principal or whoever the woman usually is, the person that did Ryan's exam, to get him into the, like, it seems like she's the only person that deals with school stuff. Like, man, you would think that this woman, like, is the only person that really and truly works at this school, because you don't really actually see them very often in actual classes or whatever. So this must be the only girl that really does anything. There's no guidance counselors, there's no vice principal. It's just her and her alone, I guess. So we ultimately have it to where they're mentioning that it's like, yeah, I think we're just going to give Ryan detention for a while, and so he can learn his lesson. And so we really have it to where Ryan is in detention, and he is desperately trying to get out of detention as quickly as humanly possible, because he is like thinking that any second, like, Oliver is just going to get um, closer to uh, closer to Marissa and sweep her off her feet, or whisper sweet nothings to her, like, yeah, Natalie is just like, she dumped me again for the 18th time. How could she keep doing this? Marissa, could you cuddle me, please? But when looking at it full well, like, there are plenty of guys that otherwise are sadly that way. Because when looking at it, like, anybody could ultimately pull apart anybody else. And yeah, why are you like this? Ba 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 ba. So it ends up being that way. So, anyways, so going at it, Marissa and Oliver aren't, but anyways, so going at it, we are having Ryan ultimately finding out the information about Oliver, how he had cut his wrist in his other school, ultimately having it to where Ryan is revealing files that were supposedly sealed, and ultimately we have it to where the principal is mentioning to Ryan, it's like, well, if anything, we've given people chances that haven't had the best background, like you, Ryan. Looking at you, buddy. And Ryan is like, well, yeah. So, anyways, we ultimately have it to where we have Ryan that wants Oliver to stay as far away from Marissa as possible, because ultimately he had been going and wanting so hard to just be with Marissa like it's nobody's business, to the point where Ryan has to punch Oliver in the face. So we ultimately have it to where Oliver is trying to make amends, and he is like, you know what, guys, like, I have a home with so many rooms that, hey, how about all of you guys just, like, come on in and just, like, have a little sleepover, have a little get together. All you guys can just sleep at my place, and isn't it all great? So we have it to where ultimately we have everybody and their brother all going, everyone who seemingly is almost having a relationship, with the exclusion of Summer, just also kind of piggybacking off of this. So we have it to where Anna and Seth are ultimately seemingly going to sleep in one bed together, and we have it to where Summer is piggybacking off of this, and so we have this funny moment where ultimately uh, Seth and Anna are trying to get back at Summer for all the crap that she had pulled via the golfing thing and everything like that, to where recently Anna and Seth had realized how much that how much that Summer is trying to get under Anna's and Seth's skin, and reasonably we have it to where Summer is ultimately forcing Seth to kind of choose sides, and ultimately that whole thing of the golf course didn't work, where ultimately Seth was ultimately just trying to choose sides, but then again, like he was just like he was miserable. So they're all in this bed together, and we have it to where Anna and Seth are trying to get back at Summer for ultimately uh, being this like douchebaggery esh like lady that it's like so they're trying to just kind of get back at her by saying all these kinds of things that she was saying, and then we have it to where Summer turns it back on them and ultimately just like, God, you guys are so in sync together. It's almost like you're brother and sister. It's like, and then to where Anna and Seth are just like, oh my God, I guess we're not going to sleep together then. So that kind of just killed their moment. So we have it to where ultimately Marissa uh, is with Oliver, and they're like putting beds together and they're talking, and so reasonably we just have it to where it seems like everything is going like la di da all fine. Uh, but reasonably we also have it to where Oliver is going to end up faking the fact that he had took any number of pills, because eventually we have it to where every single time that Ryan and Marissa are seemingly having like some alone time together, we have a call from Oliver that is saying like, "Oh no, like everything's going horribly wrong, and I'm taking so many pills." And so we end up having it to where Marissa ultimately goes to the evade of Oliver, because ultimately he has to moan and groan about that ultimately he doesn't have his girlfriend with him, and so ultimately he has to reflect on that. So we have Marissa that is going to him and ultimately mentioning like, "Oh my God, like make sure you're gonna throw up all those pills," and he's like, "Yeah, I'm sure I will." And so we have it to where Ryan and Marissa are scrambling uh to drive to where he is, and we have it to where the entire time that Marissa is desperately trying to call Oliver on his phone and he's not answering. And we have it to where Oliver is dancing around in his apartment, just kind of throwing pills uh, all over his coffee table, just to eventually just kind of hide them somewhere. And then eventually he's just kind of dancing around. So we have it to where ultimately that Marissa and Ryan are making their way to Oliver's door. And so reasonably we have it to where Oliver is now in his bathrobe and his hair is all wet. He ultimately mentions like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't answer. I took a shower and I cleaned myself up. Like everything's all okay, guys." And we have it to where Ryan and Ryan and Marissa are talking to Oliver. It's like, well, how many pills did you take? Like, maybe we should take him to the hospital. Like, Ryan is really pushing, like, yeah, let's take him to the hospital. So ultimately, he needs to be checked out by somebody. And so maybe he'll go away. So we have it to where Oliver's like, no, I think I'm fine. Like, I think I got everything out of my system. And like I think everything's okay, but Ryan's just still like, yeah, but are you sure? Because I'm gonna punch you in the face. So we have it to where reasonably Oliver is talking a good game to where it's like, no, I don't want to go on to suicide watch and be held for 72 days and this and that. It seems like if anything, like for like these lines, it kind of feels like we had somebody that kind of researched what anybody would do during these situations if something was going horribly awry. But anyways, so we have it where Oliver is talking a good game about basically, no, I'm completely fine now. If ultimately I'm in a good place, and it's like, well, really, it just feels like consistently now you're just every single time now you're just wanting to just consistently just I can't stop taking drugs kind of deal. We have to where Oliver is just pounding painkillers and stuff like that, like it's nobody's business. Every single time there is an escalation of Ryan being with Marissa, Oliver is seeing that as if, oh, like, well, I didn't win, so now I need to figure out how to win. I need to cheat my way to win. I need to sweep the leg, the Karate Kid. I need to figure out how to ultimately make it to where Marissa is just going to consistently cling on to me. And we have it to her reasonably that Oliver is just like, well, yeah, I think I just need Marissa here to just ultimately just comfort me. And so we ultimately have it to where Oliver is ultimately just kind of saying that he's okay playing this whole thing off. But reasonably, like, this thing is just never going to go away. And so recently it's going to take a punch in the face to ultimately have it to where the principal is coming to Marissa to ultimately say, you know what, like, I think that we really need to talk about a transfer student that ultimately is seemingly like he everything is kind of getting out of hand with him. And we have to where Marissa is ultimately saying it's like, well, like Oliver's fine, and we have it to where the principal's like, no, it's Ryan. Like he's getting a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I just want to make sure that you're going to be okay. So, with that also going on, we eventually also have seemingly Summer ending up with a guy that is supposedly way too funny. We have it to where this guy is so way too funny to the point where ultimately he's going with the most oldest fashionist, that's not a word, like he's going with the most oldest jokes that you've ever heard in your life, where ultimately you have like, hey, you got something on your shirt, and like those kind of silly stupid jokes. And we happen to have it to where like this guy has the lamest jokes. I seen him on Reaper and I know he's funny, and I think he's a great guy. But like the character that they have him be in this show was just stupid. I was like, hey man, I'm sure for him it's just like, dude, I just wanted some more money. And ultimately being on the show was kind of like it was like a kind of pivot thing for him to just probably get into other projects. But like, so we have it to ultimately Seth is with Summer's new boyfriend, and everybody loves him. Everybody just finds that he's hilarious to where they're all like their laughing is so weird and just so goofy. So we ultimately have it to where everybody, like, we have it to where Seth is trying to also be a comedian, and a comedian where ultimately he's like saying it's like, hey, like, make sure you're gonna take care of Luke here or he's gonna bust a gut. And like crickets just fall onto every single joke that ultimately Seth tries to do, to where reasonably like this guy is so funny and Seth is not. And so Seth is just trying to like try to make people laugh, but nothing is working. And so we ultimately have it to where reasonably within here that Seth's boyfriend ultimately is going to try and spend time with Seth, because reasonably this guy Seth doesn't like him, but he's trying to be nice to the guy. So it's like, hey, how about we spend time together? It's like the whole Luke situation all over again. So we have it to where Summer's boyfriend and Seth are ultimately spending time with one another, and we have it to where Sandy kind of walks in on this guy doing his jokes, and we have it to where Sandy pulls pulls Seth aside, and ultimately he's like, yeah, this guy's not funny. And Seth is like, I know. Like, if anything, this is Summer's new boyfriend. And he's like, dude, you need to get rid of this guy. He's not funny. So we have it to where Seth is ultimately talking to this boyfriend, and he ultimately mentions is like, you know what, like, if anything, like, I'm just kind of I'm just kind of confused on what all to do, because ultimately, like, I felt that I really, really needed to be funny, because we have, like, Summer ultimately mentions to this guy that she had dated Seth at some point, and ultimately Seth was really funny, and he was like, yeah, like, Seth and some guy named Captain Oates were really, really funny. And Seth is like, oh, Captain Oates. Oh, so she likes my horse. Like, that's what his brain noggin was thinking. He's like, ah, she likes Captain Oates. So we ultimately have it to where reasonably Seth is ultimately trying to go and ruin this relationship between this guy and Summer. And so Seth tells him, it's like, you know what? You are really funny. I just figured this out now. You are really funny. You really are. Like, I think you're really great. I think you're even better than me. But when looking at it, I just don't. I think all of your jokes are too small scale. I think you need to go big. Like, I think that you need to pull out all the stops. And so we have it to where ultimately that while Seth is kind of having his dialogue with people, he's ultimately seeing Summer's boyfriend off to the side just humping people and like going way too far out there. And we ultimately have it to where Summer is talking to Seth, and Summer's like, man, like, you know what? This guy was really funny, but you know what? I think I'm a little worn down from like all of what he's doing. I think he's like, getting a little bit too, big. And Seth is like, yeah, I don't know what's going on. I think he is going a little bit too big. Really pulling to the stuff that what they said before to really just make a joke out of it. So reasonably, I think that's all that I really need to or want to really pull through from these episodes. I think there probably is a lot more. Ultimately, I could talk about the whole Kiki situation, or not Kiki, Juju situation, because ultimately we have it to where Kirsten is ultimately needing a designer or decorator, and we ultimately have Julie who swings in and is like, you know what, I could be a decorator, and we have it to where Caleb is like, okay, make it happen. And so we have it to where Julie and tossing some decoration together in some place, and we have it to where Caleb just absolutely loves it. He's like, oh my god, it's simple but yet effective. It's great. Yeah. To where ultimately we have it to where Julie was also like putting some decorations in Kirsten's office, and we have it to where Caleb ultimately hates the new design stuff that ultimately is put into Kirsten's office, because ultimately, like, Caleb is looking at Kirsten. He's like, what's up with this new thing in your office? Like, are you crazy, Kirsten? That's Julie's. It's Julie's, you schmuck. So I think really that's kind of all of anything that I could probably think of within these episodes. But yeah, that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.